My name is Jordan Jones-Brewster. I'm the narrative designer of the upcoming game We Should Talk, and today I will be talking to you about designing intimacy through modularity and anxiety through the design of We Should Talk. But before I start, I want to be clear that I will be talking about anxiety and the way it manifests in me personally. If anyone would like to not hear a talk about anxiety right now, I want to give this content warning from at this point. And though I am talking about anxiety, I am not a medical professional, nor am I an expert. For more information and resources about anxiety, check out organizations like the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, Checkpoint, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, World Health Organization, and any others that you can find. With that, let me talk about my game, We Should Talk. We Should Talk is a short-form narrative game where players think carefully about the words they choose. The name We Should Talk came through conversations and feedback from game designer and director of the NYU Game Center, Frank Lantz. If you're watching this right now, thank you, Frank. Your input early on truly influenced the game in a positive way. There were several names tossed around in the early stages of We Should Talk. Where we're going, the difference between you and me, what's going on, and others. But we decided on We Should Talk because of the weight that sentence has. It's a phrase that can mean many things, and it can resonate differently with you depending on your personal experience with it. When you hear We Should Talk, it could mean your parents have bad news for you or they're getting ready to discipline you. It could mean you ran into a long-lost friend that wants to catch up. Or it can come to you like this, a single sentence in a text message. This is the version of the phrase that causes a pit to be building in your stomach, the one that's punctuated in a way that lets you know that a serious or important conversation is about to happen. One that if you have a lot of experience seeing it this way, like myself, and I imagine many others in my age group, it may have affected you in a way that makes you overthink all of your text responses. It makes you feel like you did something wrong, that you have the chance to mess something up, and that it's up to your communication ability to clean up the mess that you may or may not have started. All of those thoughts, concerns, and stressors often lead to anxieties that shape how you make your choices and how you want to move forward. Whether intentional or not, anxiety is our body's natural response to that stress. And along with relationship psychology, it was that knowledge, that phenomenon, that inspired many of the design decisions within We Should Talk. This isn't the first time that player anxiety was at play in the design of a narrative-focused game. In Telltale's The Walking Dead, designers used the now memed "will remember that" prompt to show the severity of someone's choices. And at the time, it worked very well. It was used to add pressure to every choice you make in the game. Once you see, Kenny will remember that, you can't unsee it. You'll see that again, potentially with every other choice that you make with the game. And the anxiety that comes with that informs every decision you'll make for the rest of the experience across all Telltale games. Am I making the right choice? Is Kenny gonna hate me for this? I don't want to upset Kenny. Why do I care about what Kenny says? What do I do? The way that We Should Talk approach simulating that same kind of pressure was through our sentence spinner, a choice mechanic that was created to let players express themselves in a way that most games don't allow. We felt that communicating through text has a nuance to it that highlights options in a way that reflects the anxieties we feel in choosing them. Modularly editing parts of a sentence, kind of like predictive text, and combining them to get your words just right, is how many people communicate through rough conversations. The sentence spinner is meant to simulate that experience. And throughout this session, I'm going to explore the design of the sentence spinner, how anxiety and psychology influence that design, and how it hopefully leads to a more meaningful experience. As you can see, the sentence spinner allows you to literally spin through parts of your sentence to allow you to carefully craft a thought from a myriad of options, with most options having many choices within them. A large part of the decisions behind that design was to emulate real relationship building, where what you say is less important than how you say it. Now that I've given you a bit of idea of what We Should Talk is, I'd like to show you some gameplay for We Should Talk, so you can see the sentence spinner in action. Even receiving a simple text, like, "When are you coming home?" when you have different plans, leads to a load of options in your head. Your partner clearly wants to spend time with you, but you have other stuff going on, and that's reasonable. But that still means you have to turn her away in a way that's respectful and conscious of her emotions. You don't want to feel like a jerk and ruin everything, even if realistically that's not what happens. I find that more often we interact with these types of choices, the harder the conversations we have in life, the more prepared we are to handle them, the less anxiety I feel about having to address them. The sentence spinner was designed in the hopes that its players will walk away from the experience having learned that taking time to think about how you communicate when you have a load of options in front of you during tough conversations can sometimes decrease the pressures of choice. When you hit a pivotal moment in these relationships, one where you know something can go right or wrong, having way too many options can overwhelm you. I know when I encounter moments like that, I often experience choice paralysis. I see every other possible choice in my mind at the same time, and all the ways that those responses that can lead to my own personal doom. And the weight of the decisions that I have to make me too anxious to begin to even know where to start. That all comes down to the concept of bandwidth. Our minds are like an empty void that gets filled with information, similar to how an empty glass gets filled with water. We can fit a lot of water into that glass, but eventually it will start to overflow. Our minds can only take so much information at once, and when it starts to overflow with that information, we start to get overwhelmed, which can lead to that feeling of anxiety. Those tough decisions become a little bit tougher when you don't have the mental space to handle them. One genre of video games that plays with the bandwidth a lot is the bullet hell genre, where instead of being overwhelmed with options, you're giving a limited number of options and instead are overwhelmed with obstacles, challenging players to make decisions while bombarding their mind with audio-visual cues of danger, testing the limits of player bandwidth. In the case of We Should Talk, our goal wasn't to attack the player's bandwidth like you might see in bullet hell games. It was to create a game that offered a more human, less transactional approach to relationships than we often see in other games like this, which meant that we needed to approach personal bandwidth head on. Often we find ourselves playing games where romance and friendship are equated to gift giving, or saying or doing the right thing. Where here, all of your relationships can be defined by your mental capacity to handle what's going on. And while keeping in mind the emotions of your partner and progressing based off of a holistic view of your actions, the search for the right thing is part of trying to build a relationship. But there never is a right answer that wins me all of the boyfriend points. There's no gift I can give to take away a negative attitude that I had, to bring support to a situation that I ignored, or to address all of the concerns that I'm having. I can't be perfect in everything that I do and min-max my relationship. I weigh through all the options in my mind, but it's my overall actions over time that determine the state of a relationship, in which direction we went, which is the direction that we went with We Should Talk. You know that each choice matters and weighs on you, but the status of your relationship remains dependent on your overall actions. More importantly, we wanted to explore the feelings that go through our minds when dealing with tough decisions. Exploring and emphasizing those feelings was important to us. In these moments, relationships can definitely go from happy to rocky. But the way you communicate through tough conversations during hard times and playful times are what define your relationships. So the weight of your decisions and the large amount of options that the sentence spinner gives you makes the decision-making process hard. Coming out of these conversations, however, always has an intimate effect on you personally. It helps define the person that you want to be, leading you towards the outcomes in life that feel deserved, which is a more natural approach to choice design that felt more like a real conversation, like a real relationship. Going through tough conversations can lead us to constantly analyzing the things that we could or should say. Sometimes the goals and values affect the options we feel like we have, making those tough conversations even more intense. Throwing a player right into those intense, heavy conversation is a good way to emulate those anxieties that I was talking about before. But doing that right from the start is too much for a game to begin with. If the game was solely about the anxieties of conversation, that would be fine. But We Should Talk is about building relationships through putting conscious thought into your conversations. So we wanted to explore the tough parts of relationship building. It was important to start with happy, low-stakes options. So you start with ordering a drink from your local bar and engaging in harmless flirting with your bartender that you've known for a while. Because a little flirting never hurt anybody, right? And then maybe later, you learn that you have a partner at home. And at that point, was that flirting still harmless? Did you already mess up? Should you be feeling bad already? Or, say your ex walks into a bar. You start getting to know him again, you learn his name as a player, you catch up on each other's lives, maybe give him crap for his mildly pretentious taste in musical theater. But then he starts to reminisce and reflect on the end of your relationship and kind of puts you on the spot, asking why things didn't work out and putting it on you to decide who to put blame upon. Changing the tone from calm to tense is not only important to build that tension, but it allows players to change the way that they interact with the sentence spinner. In a playful conversation, it allows the player to explore and learn about who these people are, sometimes even making jokes in between. In a tense conversation, it takes all that you've just learned and adds weight to it, giving the player as close to an open canvas as possible to communicate. The modularity of choice that the sentence spinner provides encourages players to slow down and consider the impact of something as simple as deciding whether to say I, you, or we, regardless of the context. All of the interactions that I just outlined can happen within 10 minutes of each other. And while you're juggling the knowledge about all of these relationships, while still being inundated with choices from the sentence spinner, the mental glass that I spoke about earlier fills up faster than expected. With We Should Talk being a bite-sized experience, 20 to 30 minutes with several branching paths and 9 endings, each minute that you spend dealing with these problems matters to you. Weaving lighthearted conversations in between the hard stuff gives you time to breathe, but the pace of the game can be faster than expected, overwhelming the player's bandwidth. And all of this comes in together in the search for intimacy. Intimacy with the player, intimacy with the game, intimacy for the purpose of growth. I see intimacy as a natural result of allowing yourself to be vulnerable, because truly opening yourself up to someone else is vulnerable. And your relationship with other people and yourself becomes stronger or weaker depending on the ways that those vulnerabilities manifest. All of the characters in We Should Talk have the possibility of opening up to you about their vulnerabilities, insecurities, and general life problems. But they don't give you that information for free. By positioning yourself as someone who wants to engage with that part of their personality, and as someone who is safe to do so with, they can open up to you. But that's all up to what the player wants. I don't want that to be misinterpreted as there being a true or good route to the game, like you may be used to in other narrative games, because it's more so that the sentence spinner is designed to allow players to be welcoming, sarcastic, dismissive, and even playful in many ways. So that putting yourself out there is available to you, vulnerabilities and all. And if you don't want to deal with that, that option exists for you too. Because forced intimacy is just as bad as a fake intimacy. That's also one of the reasons behind having 9 endings to the game. If the sentence spinner gives players a space to express and reject their anxieties, vulnerabilities, and intimacies, the endings need to feel like they're a result of those actions, culminated in one place. So like I said, there are no good or bad routes or endings, just the ones that you deserve, based on where the characters are in their lives and what you have told them. Because in the end, that's how real relationships work. Your true end is the one earned based on how your actions coincide with the people you interact with. In conclusion, though anxiety manifests itself in many ways, being aware of that as a designer allows you to create an experience that keeps the player in mind. Everything that you show the player contributes to the amount of bandwidth that they need to accommodate that information. Once you take that into consideration, the choices that you give your players have the space to become more impactful. It allows them to choose to whether welcome or push away their vulnerabilities, giving them more control over the intimacy level of their experience. I want to thank everyone for listening and watching, and thank you to NarraScope for having me. You can follow me on Twitter at Versified. You can follow We Should Talk on Twitter at _We Should Talk. You can wishlist We Should Talk on Steam, and We Should Talk has a Kickstarter campaign. As of recording, we are about 10 days away from the campaign ending and would love your support and for you to share if you'd like. However, on a more personal note, I'm not going to end this talk without mentioning that as of recording this, various protests are happening around the United States as a result of police brutality and racial injustice against Black people. One of the places affected is Brooklyn, New York. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn. I have protested this weekend in Brooklyn. And if you've even heard some of the sounds that happened outside of this right now, you might have heard the sound of my voice, the sound of the train station that I live next to. You might have also heard the sound of the police sirens and helicopters that are in my neighborhood as we speak. We Should Talk was mostly developed in Brooklyn. And if you'd like to support or donate to any of the causes that help people in need, I would really appreciate if you donate to the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund, which is an organization meant to fight for people of color being affected by these structures of oppression. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
People are being enthusiastic on the Twitch chat. I shall start with one that's actually one of my own questions. When I'm looking at the sentence spinner, I'm immediately reminded of procedural text generation run backwards. Is that something you thought about?
We didn't have the ability to handle that at the time. I can't say it wasn't a thought that was like not possible. We thought this is a thing that could be possible that way. But at the time, this game started off as a student project, so that would have just been well out of the realm of possibility. As a result, it just made it so that a lot of head down writing between a lot of people, well, between like half of the team at the time, which then evolved into mostly me being able to take that writing, kind of flesh it out and polish it as playtesting kept going along.
Okay. David is asking, how would you describe the language model?
Let's see. I think that there are two major rules that we employed when writing for We Should Talk, and it was that it needed to feel like a text message, as in it needed to be internet shorthand, or text message shorthand needed to be like a very important part of it, and that was a decision made late in the design of We Should Talk. And the other hand, it just needed to feel personal. So like it needed to be a thing that, regardless of where you're reading it, if you like can read English and understand it as such, you need to know that this is something that could feel uncomfortable in moments and a little bit happy moments, but mainly uncomfortable. Oh, and I'd like to mention that the We Should Talk team is also in the chat. So thank y'all for being here.
How do you resolve tough moral situations? Without getting into spoilers, do player actions have a way to resolve those uncomfortable moments?
I'm not sure if I would use the term resolve for that. The player can always have an opportunity to address all these uncomfortable situations, and how they address it is up to them. And generally speaking, we tried very hard to make it so that you have a realm of options as opposed to just resolution or not resolution. So your goal is never to solve the problem that is being put ahead of you, because they're not your problems. They're all problems of other people. The goal is for you to listen and to accept those problems as something that you could support them going through.
Okay, this may sound like an interview question, but what was an unexpected challenge that you ran into, and how did you deal with it?
I'd like to say this is like a kind of a generic answer, but it was scope creep. Because the game was fun to write for, and it became too fun to write for sometimes. And I would want to take places in too many realms and branches in too many directions, that because the sentence spinner kind of makes it easy and fun for me as a writer to do that, it made it go way out of scope sometimes, where I needed to rein myself in. And it was unexpected how often that would happen out of fun.
Dice Food Lodging is asking, how much writing would you characterize this game as having compared to a single track experience? I guess that's like the ratio between how much of the text, how much content do you see in a playthrough versus how much did you have to write?
I see. I've never really thought a bit about it in that terms before. So I think if you do a one playthrough of the game, you're going to be seeing very little of the content, like not a lot of content at all. It's not like there are 9 endings in the games, and it's not like there are 9 routes per se. There are several routes and reactions to different things. So I think if you just do a single playthrough of the game, you might get 20 to 30% of the content, and some things you'll be missing lines here and there, or you'll be missing grandiose routes or grandiose characters being different, characters not being who you expected them to be after that first playthrough. So it's kind of a large range of stuff that you might be missing if you were to say just play it once.
Desert Play asking, in romance games, at least in some markets of them, there is a trend towards letting the players design their own player character. Where did you wind up in the scale between players designing their own characters and authored protagonist?
With this particular game, it was important for us to have an idea of who the character in the game is, as opposed to letting people create the character. This is a very specific game, and these conversations are very specific. And I want players to feel that like they can look within themselves to answer these and address these scenarios, but it's important for it to be this character for the We Should Talk team, even though it's a very open idea of who that character is for the player. It was important to write for a very specific experience in that regard, as opposed to like letting character creations happen. Not to say that that's not something I'd be interested in doing later down the line or in the future, but that's not what We Should Talk is.
A Parish asks, what does the authoring process look like for the spinner interface content? Do you have a text file or a custom tool, or how does it work?
A little bit of all those things. So the programmer that from the original team, Jack Schlesinger, is he created this parser to break down the text that I would write in an Excel file, which led to a text file into the chat. So all that you're seeing is the work of a giant spreadsheet, pretty much. But personally, I found it hard to see the various nodes of the sentence spinner while writing like that. So while writing the game, I would another tool was made so that I could write all the choices and see all the different permutations of what was being put in there before actually transferring it over to the spreadsheet that would then go into the Unity file.
Okay, let me scroll up and down here. What is the inspiration for the art direction?
So first, I want to shout out our amazing art director, Nobonita Bomek, and Francesca Carletto Leon, who did all 3D models for the characters, because they did a great job. And the idea was that we wanted it to look like a Brooklyn bar. This game takes place in Brooklyn, and a big part of the creating of that space was the team going out and doing research of Brooklyn bars in the areas that we were working in Williamsburg and downtown Brooklyn, some even Manhattan, and kind of getting a feeling of what it's like to be a young 20-something, a mid 20-something going to a bar, the places that they would go to. So that's how that kind of influenced the art direction. And it was the setting that we wanted the place to be in. And then the lights and the kind of ambiance kind of blew out of that. But that's more of to get deeper into that question, I think that'd be more of a conversation for our art director at OVO.
To be the Anthropic asking, I'm imagining other applications that start with the same part title. For example, we should talk about racism. We should talk about other topic. Do you have thoughts on expansion or using the same interface for other projects?
I can't say that we haven't thought about how to use this in other projects, but that's the thing that we've spoken about this entire process of making the game. There's no plans on doing that right now, but I think that would be interesting, to say the least. But I think that's all I have to say on that.
How did you end up deciding on Kickstarter? Did you consider other fundraising platforms?
It was, if we were going to do like crowdsourcing or fundraising, it was probably always going to be Kickstarter, because of the way that we can interact with the community, but also because of our own team's personal experience using Kickstarter. It wasn't the original goal for us to use. As a result, it was really as a result of the state of the world right now that we ended up going towards that platform. But it's been great to us, and I'm very glad that we did choose that.
By the way, I apologize if it sounds like I'm speaking over you on the Twitch stream. There's like a different audio delay between your voice and my voice, and they're not going to sync up perfectly. And I fear that people think that I'm stepping on you. It's just because it's software latency. Maybe we can fix it in post. There was a follow-up question about scope creep. How do you limit scope? The eternal question.
So Carol Mertz is a person that is a part of the We Should Talk team and wore many hats in the We Should Talk team. She did development, she did design, and she forefronted production for the game. And really, that it's just having a great person doing production is what prevented scope creep. Having one set of eyes on a thing is a terrible way to prevent scope creep, because that I get so excited to write that I want to keep going. But having strict deadlines, having people make sure that what you're doing is in service of the project, in service of whatever sprint you're going to, I think I can almost entirely contribute that to Carol Mertz.
Okay. Any other questions coming in from the Twitch side? We can, of course, continue the discussion over on Discord. And Carol Mortz is commenting, we had to make sure that we focused on what was needed to be in the game versus what we wanted in the game.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can take it over to Discord now. Thank you so much for speaking to us. All of our talks have had a lively discussion afterwards, so I expect this will be the same.